I woke up one night, in the middle of the night, as a 4-year-old May, go to the door, and my house was full of police, and there would have been ambulance people, and my dad had just tried to kill my mum. He would become violent with my brother, and also on occasion with me. And those memories are utterly horrific. He'd actually stolen loads of money as a chartered accountant, got found out, and then decided the way to resolve that was to kill my mother and then kill my brother and I. So the other part of this story is when I was 8 years old, his mother killed herself. So I imagine that was part of what triggered his inability to cope. I pretty much became an addict of marijuana. I also tried other drugs. So I had a nervous breakdown when I was 18. I didn't understand how people smiled. I hit a rock bottom of what on earth am I doing with my life. I remember leaving India, and it was like it was my soul speaking to me, and it was crying, going, you can't go on like this. I lost the career I didn't want, and my dad within 4 days of each other. And that was the end of my life as I knew it. I was on my knees, and it was like, please just show me, how do I stay alive? And that was the moment. The intention was there to do right by them. And it always was. And that is love. That is the power of love. That's my life. I am a pattern changer. They are the container and internal scaffolding for the way you put one foot in front of the other. This is when I want to cry. This is when I want to cry my eyes out, because you're here saying, where is the evidence, as people do, where is the evidence? And that it can really be so simple, and that we are so wrong. Everybody tells a story. Is like, I look at the mechanics of your body. Your emotion, is energy in motion. That's what emotion is. Anyone who has any type of chronic pain, emotional or physical, you are the one that you're looking for. You are the one that with the right guidance will be able to realign the structures in your body, to realign the way you move and the way you think and the way you feel. When you feel in to the power of correctly aligned biomechanics, you will experience yourself as someone you've never experienced yourself as being. The gift of enlightenment is to truly feel free in your body and to feel alignment in your body.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. Okay, my guest this week on the podcast is the founder of the Ixchel system, and believes everybody has a story to tell.
Yeah.
Couldn't be more fitting, I guess, for this podcast, right?
Yeah.
I'm delighted to welcome Victoria Salomon to the podcast. Victoria, how are you?
Oh, I'm very good today. I'm in my happy place here. So, yeah, it's wonderful.
We've got a little bit of a new setup going on with the podcast, which is super exciting today. We've come to your home at Projects here. And
absolutely. This is where I hang out when I'm not working with clients. This is my co-working space. So welcome.
Well, I know. I'm excited to be here. This is very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah.
So, look, Look, we've obviously known each other for quite a while. We've just done obviously the article in SBT.
Yes.
And I've been fortunate enough for you to share your journey with me on a few occasions.
Yeah.
It's so inspiring. And look, we've been talking about doing this, and I'm so glad it just fits in so great after the International Women's Day feature,
Yes.
and then coming on and doing this. So I'm really excited about delving
Thank
in,
you.
and it's gonna be awesome. So look, let's kick off as we always do. I want to know something about. Talk to me a little bit about life growing up. In your childhood, and something about that sort of shaped who sits in front of me today.
Okay, so I was born into, at the time, quite a wealthy family. My father was very successful. He qualified as a chartered accountant by the time he was 21. He was like a genius, but he was manic depressive. Now they'd call that bipolar, but he was a manic depressive, not necessarily diagnosed at that point, but that's what he was. I think when I was born, the year before, he'd been in bed for practically a year. Yeah, hadn't been able to function, and he would live these extremes. So he'd be very high performing or completely kind of not functioning at all. And so I was born into that. So there was already an issue going on. They had my brother. My brother is nearly 4 years older than me. And then I was born. And I think things were probably fairly stable until I was 4 years old. And I woke up one night, in the middle of the night, as a 4-year-old May, go to the door, and my house was full of police. And there would have been ambulance people, and my dad had just tried to kill my mum. And it was one of those memories, when we look at trauma, there are the memories we might make up, and then of course there are memories. Well, I have my memory of that night, and it was a memory really that stayed with me for life. And my father went to prison for a couple of years. No one ever spoke to me about what I saw that night. My mother did survive. He had literally taken a mallet and smashed my mum's head with a mallet, so she was in intensive care and in hospital for a while. So during that period, if you think about a little child, whose one parent has disappeared to prison, the other parent is in intensive care, what happened to myself and my brother during that period is, I have a complete blackout apart from the odd memory of the odd thing.
But you can still remember, at 4, you can still remember that.
I remember opening the door, and I remember, I don't remember opening the door. I remember having opened. There's like a snapshot, and I remember a policeman looking down at me with horror, a look of horror. And I remember thinking I'd done something really bad and really wrong. So as a very little vulnerable 4-year-old who's in the middle of an attempted murder scene, what I'm taking in is I'm bad, I shouldn't be seen, no one's there, desperately wanting my mum, whisked away, and then in this sense of, what would be utter trauma for a 4-year-old, with no one, just basically sent around different family members to take care of us, until my mother came out of hospital. And then I would say from there, I took on needing to take care of my mum on some level. I remember the first night or morning she was back, we would have been in a friend's house, one of her friends, and I remember going into her bedroom, drawing her curtains, thinking, I just need to take care of my mummy. It was like I took that on at a very early age, in terms of, as a child, you're trying to survive. So who knows how that works? But I remember that feeling of, I need to take care of my mum. I'd got her back. I didn't want to lose her again. And no one told me what happened that night. No one ever spoke to me about what happened. I would be taken to visit my dad in prison. As far as my mother was concerned, this was a one-off. It was never going to happen again. She would prepare the home for my dad to come back, even though this had happened. I mean, now when we think about this, it's insane. But this was 1974, And actually, for myself, in the last few years, I had to look into domestic abuse very, very seriously. And actually, the first refuge in this country was only set up in 1974. So the thinking back then in the early 70s, my mother would say to this day, she thought that the most important thing was to keep the family together, right? No matter what had happened. Of course, her parents didn't necessarily think that. And I was taken to visit my father in prison. I remember he was in Winchester prison, and I remember climbing over the big prison doors. You have to climb. And I remember my little brain thinking, this isn't a hospital. I was being told I was visiting him in hospital. And I remember the way I was climbing through big doors or through what a prison is. I remember thinking, this is a prison. And then thinking I was really bad and wrong for thinking something that was different to what I was being told. So I always thought I was bad for knowing things I shouldn't know. It was like the truth, the way I was being programmed with the truth, it was completely mental. And then being taken, sitting on my dad's knee, like he was this amazing guy, which on a good day he could be. He was when he was good, he was very, very good. And when he was bad, he was, terrifying. So I was being taken to a prison to sit on my father's knee, who had just tried to kill my mum. And the program, when I look back at it, was to love that, to think that that's all that mattered. And of course, when he came out of prison, he was in prison for 2.5 years, but because my mother kind of set it up, and he didn't necessarily want to come back to us. It was more my mother, I think, that just felt it was just a one-off. She was convinced it was a one-off. And then what happened was he came back, and so I would have been about 6.5, 7. And then he would become violent with my brother and also on occasion with me. And those memories are utterly horrific. And my mother was kind of programmed in a way to be complicit because she was in what I understand to be her own trauma response, and believed that if my dad was hitting us for certain things, it was because that was right. Like she just, it's mad. It's mad, mad looking back on it. And then through all of this, he was suicidal all the time. So he tried to kill himself. Before I was born, he tried to kill himself in that first 4 years, I think. And what he'd also done, was major fraud. As a chartered accountant, the reason he tried to kill my mum was because he'd actually stolen loads of money as a chartered accountant, got found out, and then decided the way to resolve that was to kill my mother and then kill my brother and I. Like this was the way he thought. So he was a very, very sick man. But if you met him, you would have thought he was the most together, charismatic, successful. As someone said to me in the last few years when I was going through my divorce, the most dangerous people in the world don't look dangerous. Yeah, the most dangerous people in the world can come over as very charismatic, very charming, very professional. And so on a good day, that was my dad. On a bad day, it was horrendous. So I grew up, if I was hit, or when I witnessed him hitting my brother, which happened a lot more. So I grew up with, I just need to be a good girl. Like I must just, everything was hypervigilance, everything. I didn't know I was hypervigilant. I didn't know what was happening to me, but everything was terror. Everything was dread. Obviously, at school, I was very shy. I remember one day, all the kids, by now I'm probably 8 or 9, all the kids sitting around in the playground saying what their dads did. And I was like, oh, my dad does so-and-so. And one of the little girls went, oh, no, your dad's in prison. So even though I wasn't allowed to know he was in prison and I had been in prison, it was obviously known around me that was, and I remember again thinking I was really bad for knowing something that I wasn't allowed to know. I mean, it was crazy. And then by the time I was 10, my dad did another really bad level of fraud, and again disappeared. At this point, I came home from school one day when I was 10 years old. He'd gone. His cupboards were empty. My mother was absolutely in pieces, so it was like needing to take care of my mum. So all of this was being experienced as if I, as a child, didn't have feelings, was just a child of this. It was like, it felt like I didn't, it was never about me. And at the same time, you know, I had a brother who was far more reactive, far more angry, and would take a lot of that, would act that out with me. So I was this little girl, and I was just observing this crazy world around me as if it was normal. This was my normal. I knew nothing else but what was happening. And so my dad disappeared when I was 10. He was gone for 2 months. Then he reappeared and told us he was going to take us to America. And, you know, you're dealing with a psychotic manic depressive, basically, as if it's normal. Reappeared basically after 2 months disappearance within a week, said he was going to take us all away. Then that night, downed a bottle of whiskey. And for me, this was probably one of the hardest things. It was basically a suicide attempt right in front of us. And I woke up, and because again, my mother would be going nuts. And I just looked at my dad, and he was just being all this black vomit coming. I mean, crazy. No 10-year-old should witness any of this. And then he said something, a question I'd asked him, and he said it in a way, in his delirium, where I then believed it was all my fault, because in his unconscious delirium, he was repeating something about what I'd said, as if it was making him feel bad. Of course, he was, you know. So then he's being shipped out the house by the ambulance people, you know, and then comes back, and within a week, he disappeared again. So again, my mother's in absolute chaos. And she then puts me into boarding school while she goes, because my dad would disappear off to America. So then I'm in this, again, utter trauma. You just can't imagine it, can you? I mean, this story is like, how can it be real? And so then abandonment, you know, when you most need your mum, when you most need to be cared for, actually. So both parents were AWOL. And the reason she went after him was because we'd got a call saying he'd done a major suicide attempt and he was in A&E in a Los Angeles hospital. She went, she brought him home. He had both arms in slings. He was put into a kind of he was sectioned. And, you know, I'll never forget it. It was my 11th birthday being taken to this mental hospital. I mean, seriously, when I look back at it, it's like, you know, sitting in the garden of this. It was a place called Graylingwell in Chichester, and it was just all completely bonkers. Anyway, my dad wasn't like a mentally ill person that could be sectioned, because he was obviously mentally ill, because when he was sane, he was the most sane person in the room. So they put him in a therapy unit there, a kind of group therapy place for 6 months. And he would say, you know, once I've done this, then I'm going to be okay. It was always like, when I've done this, then it's going to be okay. Then it's, you know, and as his daughter, I'd be the one sat on his knee being told, you know, oh, you make everything better. You know, so I had all of this strange, you know, I adored him and I just wanted him to be okay.
Even after, like you say about daughter, even after all of that, like looking up to, like you say, you just mentioned all of that from 4 to 11 and all of that stuff you've gone through. Even then, there was still that admiration. Or
he was my dad. Yeah. He was the only dad I had. And when he was good, he was like the most fun, lovely. I mean, he wrote a book about his life. It's called Images of Destruction. If you look up his book on Amazon, there's one review and the title is terrifying. And, it's like, wow, that was my childhood. And based in that unit, he started to have an affair with a 19-year-old. So he would have been 43, and then he never came home. He ended up leaving the unit with this 19-year-old. So he went for a much, much, much younger woman, and never came home.
What was your mum's reaction to that?
Absolutely in pieces. Still desperately wanted him until it got to the money. Until it got to the divorce. And then suddenly I went from having a mum who would do anything to get her husband back and love him, to having a mum for a period, which I understand, who loathed the fact that I still had a relationship with my dad. So it went from, kind of living through my mum, through this whole chaos of the relationship, to them being pitched against, which is a classic divorce kind of thing in not a good situation, to being terrified of even being on the phone to my dad when my mum was around. I used to have to go and stand in phone boxes to speak to my dad. And he lived in London. I was devastated. I was like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old girl. He was marrying some, she was 19. My younger daughter now is 19. It's just, you can't eat. I can't, it's crazy. And, but that woman probably gave him another 14 years. And it was 14 years later that he finally killed himself, And his... So the other part of this story is when I was 8 years old, his mother killed herself. So I imagine that was part of what triggered his inability to cope, because she had been completely psychotic as well. So my father was a child of psychotic behaviour. Anyone who knows his mother, I was never even allowed near her. So he was a child of violence and psychotic behaviour. That was his childhood too.
And he just then repeated what
he repeated it.
His learned behaviour.
Yeah, he repeated it. In his book, he talked about the violence from his parents. He released that book when he was 16, when I was 16, sorry. But what he didn't put in the book was how he'd repeated the violence with my brother and I. So he put in his book all about having tried to kill my mother, but he completely, again, I feel, silenced the abuse that also my brother and I had experienced. It's as if none of that ever happened, which it did,
After that period, and then I guess leading up to that, over the next sort of 14 years, what was your relationship then like with your dad's gone now, but your relationship like with your mum over that period?
My relationship with my mother, so she had 2 or 3 years of, she'd be passing out on the floor. She would be, she was on Valium. She was completely traumatized. And so there was a period, because my brother became very angry, very, there'd be issues with police, there'd be, he if you think of fight or flight, he was in fight. Yeah, he could be very aggressive. Bless him, look at the example he'd had, right? Look at it. So from that, and my mother couldn't deal with him. So he was kind of going crazy. And then my mother clearly believed the answer was she just needed to find another husband. And that became what she focused on. And she had a series of boyfriends until she found my stepdad. And that for me was kind of, so I kind of went from being the one she was dependent on to suddenly kind of feeling, quite invisible in some ways, because she was, but when I was 14, she met my stepfather, and actually my stepfather has been the man in my life who has been the rock. He has been. It's not that our relationship has always been easy, because actually for him, witnessing the love I had for a father who was clearly, you know, in his eyes didn't deserve what I had. But you know, so there are the pluses and minuses. But the example I saw of how you go about trying to find a man to have a relationship with wasn't ideal from my perspective, but for her, she accomplished what she needed to, and you know, it probably set her up so that in a way she was taken care of. I wasn't taken care of in many ways, because no one was checking in ever on my mental health, or ever.
Listening to all that of what you've gone through as a child, was there any elements of how did you get on at school? How did that affect that type of like a normal, with class as a normal childhood? Like with friends, and what was that like for you?
So when my father was in prison, in Winchester, there was a convent close by with nuns, and they just happened to also have a convent in Upper Beeding near Stenning, which is not far from here. And when my dad came out of prison, they visited him, or they visited us, and I was put into that convent school. And it was it literally each year wouldn't have had more than 26 kids in it, and half of them were boarders. So I was there from the age of 8 to 16. They clearly totally had a sense of what was going on in my life. So I thought I had a completely normal life. I had no idea that what was going on in my world wasn't ideal. It was also a boarding school, so they would keep me there boarding when that was necessary. Horrendous for me. I would feel isolated, alone, abandoned, or whatever, but they would keep me there. My capacity to study, when I look back at it, when it was all kicking off at home, I was always bottom of the class. I thought I was stupid. I thought there was something wrong with me. The teachers would tell me, because they wouldn't all know my personal situation. They, you know, I was one of the 3 bottom ones in the class. And then when my mother's life stabilized and my stepdad came back in, it came into the equation around that time. And whenever there was stability, you could literally see it. I just went up. But they would always, at the end of each term, say where each child was in the class in terms of like, which is crazy now. I don't think they would do that. And I would just literally go up and down. But I ended up coming up, in the end, I did okay. In the end, when everything was stable, I was able to study. But what's so tragic is that we judge ourselves not based on necessarily what's going on in our environment, at least then, but based just on results we get. But I ended up doing very well in my O-levels or GCSEs. I kind of got everything. I was amazed when I got good results, because I thought I got bad results. I didn't have any idea that it was because my life was in pieces that I couldn't function correctly. So when I got good results, I didn't understand. I thought someone must have made a mistake. But actually, that's when you can process information. You can. But then I went on to do A-levels, and unfortunately, my grandfather killed himself when I was 16 in about the second term of my A-levels. And then my capacity to study just hit the ground. Because again, no one reached out to me. I was just stuffed back into school as if nothing had happened. It was looking back at it, complete insanity.
So your grandfather, was that your dad's father?
Yeah, both my father's parents killed themselves. My grandmother when I was 8, my grandfather when I was 16, and then my dad did it when I was 25. And I always lived with the dread. I always lived with in terms of my father. I think especially after my grandfather did it, knowing that my dad had been suicidal in my childhood, you just live with the dread. You just,
It's going to happen. Well, it's just going to happen to him.
Yeah. Like you might live with the dread of someone getting cancer, or you might, but that, you know, I find it really difficult because there are acceptable, common sense ways that people can die. Yeah, it doesn't make sense if someone dies of a disease, but excuse me, there's something about suicide which is, you think you should be able to avoid it.
When it comes to mental illness, I guess so much of related to suicide and how people cope and people don't cope, asking for help and getting that right help and being in that position to be able to do that is, you know, it's difficult, I guess, to put ourselves in that position if we've not been there. But I guess we talk about trauma. I've talked about it on many podcasts, and some of the people that have gone through, you know, various different abuse and others.
Yeah.
I mean, you've just highlighted. I've asked that question about how that shapes who you are today, but how has, like, you've listed an incredible amount of variety of different traumas through different stages right the way up. So how old would you have been when your dad committed?
I was 25.
25. So for the first 25 years of your life, you've seen 3 people kill themselves.
Yeah, 3 people.
In your family. I guess what I'm keen to find out, what is it about you, all of them things you've seen, to, I guess, make a change in your life? Or what was it like? Where was you in your head and your mindset at that point?
Yeah. So I'd already got really sick when I was 19, 20. I basically couldn't sleep properly for about 5 years. I think actually from my granddad's suicide, I started using drugs, so I self-medicated, which is a classic thing if you don't get the support you need. So I would smoke marijuana the whole time to just anesthetize myself. And that was my way. And marijuana became like my best friend. It became my companion. It was like...
It's like your coping mechanism.
Yeah, it was like, okay, so what I need to do is not feel. Like, if I'm feeling bad, I just need to do something to change how I feel. And I truly believe that, because no one else had given me any other coping mechanisms. And it's not like today with TikTok and Instagram with, you know, oh, do this to, you know, and nothing like that. And so I just self-medicated, and I pretty much became an addict of marijuana. I also tried other drugs. So I had a nervous breakdown when I was 18. Yeah, so I left home when I was 18 because my mother found the marijuana and was like, there is no way you're allowed to do this in this house. So it's stop doing this or leave the house. So my need to self-medicate was so great, I moved out the house. I had a job working at Barclays Bank, and I then escalated into far more serious drug use. Anything to numb out my feelings. By the time then I had a nervous breakdown, because obviously there's a limit to how many drugs one can take. I had the nervous breakdown. The doctors were basically saying, we think what's wrong with you is your periods or your family history. So they put me on loads of Valium and things like that. That was actually, in a way, what knocked me more into a nervous breakdown, because the last thing my body could deal with really was heavy kind of drugs from psychiatrists. So I took myself off that, and I I managed to also not smoke marijuana for a little bit of time. But then I would slip back into it. And the party scene was starting in Brighton. It was like acid house, you know, all of that thing, you know, because, but I still couldn't function. I didn't understand how people smiled. I literally didn't understand. So life for me was a big pretense. do what you can to pretend you're okay. That's what you have to do. By this point, also, boys were in the equation. I would only be attracted to really dysfunctional boys who would treat me like crap, you know, because I didn't have anything. And then I had a complete physical breakdown when I was 20. It was like my body just stopped functioning. And they looked inside me and they discovered that I had no lining in my digestive tract. And then they looked again and they discovered I had something called celiac. So my body at this point, if we think now the celiac plexus is actually the seat of the parasympathetic nervous system. So my body had just completely shut down on being able to process anything. And it had become physical, you know, it had become that sinister that it was that deep in my body. But once they diagnosed me with celiac, you know, I hadn't been able to sleep. The doctor said to me, give it 6 months and you're going to feel like a different person. And it was true. 6 months later, you know, when I was about 21, I finally understood how people could smile and mean it. I felt different. You know, the celiac disease for me had been a very psychological experience. And my doctor said to me, oh, I've only known 2 people diagnosed with this before, and they've both been in mental hospitals for schizophrenia when they were diagnosed. So there is a possibility that this had come down through the family and could have had a big part to play in what was going on for my father and his mother. You know, that's all a possibility. Anyway, I moved to London. I got a job working as Sir Dennis Thatcher's secretary, which was just utterly random. And my life really, you know, I was doing okay, actually.
Did you stop taking other drugs then?
I would still smoke marijuana, you know, but I wouldn't say more so than my friends. I would say I was pretty typical for 2 or 3 years. I think I actually accessed a pretty typical life. But whereas all my friends had gone off to university, because I'd been so ill and so disturbed, and when you're like that, you have learning. It's a learning disability. So I hadn't gone to university. So by this point, I had a real chip on my shoulder, and my level of self-worth was still on the floor. What I would have done if all that hadn't happened to me, I would have been with my peers, I would have felt more connected. So I lived this very strange life, and by the time I was 25, I went to India because a friend of mine was getting married in India, and I hit a rock bottom of what on earth am I doing with my life? Because actually, even to this point, and this is very important, everything I did was still about trying to make my dad happy. It was, and my mother to a point. Oh, if I do this, then they'll approve of me. If I do that, it was all in my head. Life was about doing things so that the people you love would approve and be happy with you.
That was their validation.
Yeah, that was all it was about. Life was never, ever about who are you, what's your purpose, what makes you happy, yeah? Where do you want to go in life? When you think of all the things we need to do to create a life for who we are, I was a shell. And the way I dealt with that was I smoked drugs and at weekends went partying.
Again, talking about those first 25 years, do you look back at, is there any points in there that you reflect on and you look at with any form of joy, happiness, those type of emotions and feelings? Was it?
I know after my dad's suicide and a few years later, I was put on incapacity benefit. I was put on it, the DHS or whatever they were the ones putting me on it. I went to see a doctor and explained my situation, and he said, Victoria, I'm signing you off work for 2 years. And I was like, what? And he said, and I'd said I didn't go to university or something, and he said, you may think you didn't go to university, Victoria, but you were in the university of life. and you are going to need to unpack some things that have happened to you, and it's going to take time. So I would say, looking back, that period of my life, I was a lost soul, for sure. I was functioning, but I was a lost soul. No, it was not a joyful time in my life, but it gave me all the experiences I needed to live on the dark side that allows me now to hold extraordinary safe space for people who are struggling. So it was I am grateful. It may sound perverse, but there is nothing that happened that I have not been able to convert into an experience that has created something good. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just find, like, I'm trying to, in my head, I'm trying to process. So, like, the majority of people in this world, or certainly within my circles and my experience of life, I guess, is that I was, I guess, the other complete end of the scale of where we are in our lives. I was loved unconditionally, had an amazing childhood, and I was really, I guess, really fortunate. And then we can unpack ourselves a little bit, and we look back, and maybe there's certain points in our lives. I'm fortunate not to have any trauma, I guess, but points where you go, oh, that wasn't great, maybe, or that was not a great point in my life. Whereas I'm listening to your story, and it, like you said, there's so much trauma. I guess that's what I was trying to go with. Like, you're the other end of the scale where you look at and go, if you go back over any of them points, were there any snippets of joy or happiness? And I guess that's where, as you're saying, not really.
I loved musicals. Yeah. I loved music. I loved dancing to Madonna in my bedroom. I loved, there were moments, there were times I loved going raving. Yeah, I loved, I was still, there were good times. It was just much, much harder for me than it would have been.
And obviously understandable. I guess I really want to, because relationship-wise as well, you mentioned about the people. So where was you in your relationships at that point as well? Like,
I mean, I was incapable of being attracted to a man unless they were an alcoholic or a drug addict. And I had no idea why. I had no idea why. If a guy treated me well, I thought there was something wrong with him. There was no attraction there. Whereas obviously if I was treated, if there was extreme drama or there was rejection or abandonment, that was my comfy place. That was my normal place. Of course, it wasn't comfy. It was horrible. But I was incapable of having a functional relationship, and I literally didn't know what was wrong with me, because again, there was nothing at that point educating around that. And I think the important thing to add in here is that when I was 25 and I realized I couldn't keep going in the direction I was in, and I went to India, and I had this kind of 3 weeks away. I was working in the city in London at the time. This 3 weeks away, and it was like the pack of cards collapsed, because I think I realized something was very wrong. I knew something was wrong, and I made a decision. I remember leaving India, and it was like it was my soul speaking to me, and it was crying, going, "You can't go on like this. You can't." And I came back to England, and I said to my dad, I think I'm going to jack everything in and go to India and go and do this and go and do that and start to do things that I wanted to do. And the uproar and the reaction to this was not great. And so then very soon and even where I worked in the city, I decided I'd only work the hours I was paid for. Big mistake when you're working. And within a couple of months, they pulled me in saying, we've got our eye on you. And then that became constructive dismissal. And I had this war inside me going on between trying to tick the boxes and be the good girl, doing what would make my parents happy, and desperately trying to find myself. I was 25, and then it all came to a head in October 1995. They pulled me into the office. They literally escorted me out of the office in the city because I hadn't been working correctly, because I couldn't anymore. I'd literally got as far as I could, Sam. And I remember the thing that terrified me most, because they were like, that's it, we're firing you, basically. We'll call it, you can resign, but they forced me to resign. And the thing that terrified me most was telling my dad. I was terrified of telling my dad, and it was the 12th of October, and I will never forget it. And I spent 24 hours terrified about telling my dad I'd lost the job. And my last conversation ever with my dad was telling him. And for some reason, he sounded like a really loving, lovely dad. And he was like, well, just go for long walks, Victoria. And he sounded really normal and really functional. And he was like, but what are you going to do? Are you going to go to India now? It was like he was losing his power. It was a really strange thing. And I took the weekend. And then on the Monday, I suddenly thought, because I'm Jewish, I'd never been to Israel. And I was on my way back to London, to my home. And I thought, I'm going to go to Israel. That will make my dad happy. He'll be really happy if he knows I'm going to go to Israel. And I was racing home to tell him, to phone him. And I got home and I got the call and he'd killed himself. Yeah. It was... Yeah. Am I responsible for my dad killing himself? Because absolutely not. But did it take years for me to get to that place? Absolutely, yes. And I never got, yeah. It was horrific. So my career, I lost my career, the career that I didn't want. I lost the career I didn't want, and my dad within 4 days of each other. And that was the end of my life as I knew it.
If you take me back to that point, what is your mindset, and how do you as an individual, with all of that and everything that you've dealt with up until that point, get yourself up and go again?
So something very strange happened to me the week before my dad killed himself. And this is where my story, I kind of tell myself, it's all for a reason. It's all part of a greater plan, perhaps. I saw my dad kill himself for a week before he did it, and I thought I was making it up. I saw him lying on the floor in his bathroom, and I saw it, and I was picking up the phone to call him because I kept thinking he was dead. I had a conversation as well with him where it had flagged up he might be at risk, but I was in terror of, literally, like I'm looking at you now. There was something going on with my stepdad, and I remember the thought, oh my God, I hope you're not going to kill yourself. And then thinking I was really bad for that. But the point of sharing that is that I saw him do it. And I saw him do it, well, I saw the scene of it, and I thought I was making it up, and I was wrong. How did I pick myself up? I was not just dealing with the suicide of my dad, I was dealing with this part of myself that was functioning in a dimension that I knew nothing about. how did I see that? How did I know that? We'll talk about Joe Dispenza and stuff, and the quantum. There's a lot around that. I travelled. I left. I left the country for 2 years. I took all the drugs I could to anaesthetize myself initially, and I climbed the highest mountains to do the geographical, and eventually I was on my knees, and I was literally on my knees and in India, and there was a thunder and lightning moment. There really was. And I was literally like, God, just show me, how do I stay alive? How do I do that? How do I stay alive? Because I wasn't finding it at the top of the highest mountain. I smoked so many drugs that my throat was raw. I then had to take antibiotics because my throat was so messed. That made me feel even more horrific. Pharmaceutical drugs. I always, and by this point, because all the suicides in my family had been alcohol and pharmaceutical drug overdoses, I didn't trust the medical world. So I was on my knees, and it was like, please just show me, how do I stay alive? And that was the moment. That was the moment when I started looking for answers. And I was in Dharamsala, where the Dalai Lama lives at the time, and I was in such a state, I was on my own. I was just a 26-year-old on my own, in the middle of India, trying to deal with this. And I fell into like these Tibetan doctors, basically. And I started then, something guided me. That I believe, Sam, there has always been something keeping an eye on me. The convent that took me in. There has been a spiritual, and I'm Jewish, right? But of course, I was the only Jewish girl in the convent. There has been something greater, more powerful. I don't begin to understand. Something has been keeping an eye on me, because I suppose at that point, I needed to start to learn things. I needed to start to learn about the body, about alternative medicine, about the mind-body connection. And I wouldn't have cared then if I died. I did things when I travelled that could have put my life so much at risk, but I had no value on my life.
Because that's the other thing, I guess, from your learned behaviour, the things that you'd seen, the trauma you'd been through, like that would have, did that enter your mind? That was an option, like, because you mentioned about, I just wanted to stay alive, but was there the other side of that coin? Was there ever a thought process of you thinking?
And I would reword that. I'm not sure I did want to stay alive. That wasn't the question was really, how do I stay alive? Show me, how do you do this? How do you do this thing called life? How do you actually want to stay living in a body? Because this is not fun. And I'm clearly haven't got the answers, because I'm on my knees. Your question was, how do you get yourself up? I didn't know. And so what you're referring to is suicidal ideation, I think, as well. Did I think I would do it? I have lived my whole life struggling with suicidal ideation, not in terms of calculating ways that I'm going to kill myself, but in terms of the terror of when the trigger will happen that will make me kill myself. That was my frame of mind. When is the trigger going to happen that's going to make me kill myself? A bit like if you've had a family full of cancer or a different disease, it's like, when is it going to
get me?
And so that was always, it wasn't that I wanted to kill myself, it was more that I knew I was the highest risk of suicide for many reasons, and the terror that at any point the trigger's going to happen that's going to make me do it. And to be honest, I only really feel I totally resolved that a couple of years ago.
Because again, it's that living a life almost carrying that weight.
Yeah.
you the whole time. And then I guess where does kids come into it? And like you say, that
They were
relationships
and
you've got as a mother, is that the
yes,
is that the switch?
it was the switch. It was. I mean, so I met the father of my children in India, and we met there. We didn't get together then, and then I met him a couple of years later in Israel, and I was smoking a lot of drugs. I was not in a fit. I was not a well lady. I was so vulnerable to the decision I was going to make about the type of man I was going to be with. I was high risk vulnerable without even realizing it. But in many ways, he wanted to have kids, and we didn't plan them. They happened. My first daughter, I managed to stop smoking or anything, but it just happened. I was doing healing arts. I was starting to train. I'd done massage, reflexology, all these things. I was on my journey, and shamanic. I was doing a lot of shamanic training to try and deal with this more kind of clairvoyant aspect, which was very strange for me to have going on. The drugs also helped keep a lid on that as well, actually. But so obviously my daughters, my second daughter was my rock bottom, because my relationship with my husband and my family was very, very stressful, and the only way I knew to deal with stress was to smoke marijuana. It was the only way I knew how to cope. And my rock bottom of that was, and if I feel shame, if I feel regret, it's those few months of all my life that is the hardest, because that was when I fully understood I was an addict, because I couldn't stop. When you shouldn't be doing something and you can't stop, that was when I knew. And yet when you desperately want to stop, because you are a mother, you want to stop, and yet you can't, that's when addiction is there. And so because of them, because of the children, I ended up in 12-step. And so I 12-step recovery. Initially, actually, I had to say to my ex-husband, you can't do this near me anymore. You can't smoke casually and bring it near me. This is really serious for me. And I went into 12-step recovery from when my younger daughter was about 11 months old. I went into Al-Anon. I went into a fellowship which was for friends and family of alcoholics, and I discovered that there was no way I could be any other way than I was, having grown up in the environment I grew up in. And I started seeing, I would visit AA groups, and I would start to see people who'd been like my dad, who had turned their lives around. I mean, that was like, oh my God, you mean you can be that, and then you can actually rearrange that? Like, that was, I always say that some of the most incredible people for me that I've met to help me heal have been in 12-step recovery rooms, because they shared enough to help me wake up. They shared enough to show that there was possibility. If we're talking about suicidal ideation, what these people showed me was that, oh, okay, so not everyone ends up killing themselves if they've had this story. Not everyone. So that was the beginning of me understanding that not everyone has the same ending.
And I guess if you had to go and pinpoint, that would be the point where potentially, for the first time, was this the first time that you thought there was a little bit of hope?
Yeah.
You saw a little bit of hope, and actually, for whatever we've been through in our lives, I guess if there's that little bit of hope, and we truly believe that, we can take those steps, I guess.
Absolutely. I used to take my children with me into 12-step fellowship meetings. Really? Yeah. I used to go to family meetings, and I would have my kids on the floor, because I was so desperate. I was so desperate to not repeat the patterns of my past. for these kids. And, and there were 12-step meetings for Al-Anon, and where I could take my kids and I could feel like I wasn't alone, because I wasn't, I had such bad pregnancy depression, because I didn't fit in with most of the mums. I was like, it was all, and also my parents hadn't parented me in a way that I was a priority.
This is what is even more fascinating. Like, I guess one of the reasons I feel honoured that you're able to come on and share this, because so many, as you've mentioned, you was by people sharing their story, you was given a bit of hope.
Yeah.
And I think, like, for anyone listening, just sitting there listening right now, and they would begin, wow, how has someone gone through so much, and yet still find that strength to go, actually, finding the strength to go, I am going to be the one that breaks this cycle.
Yeah.
Because your grandparents, your father.
Yeah.
But I guess I just like trying to, where did that strength come? Because you, like you said, you and for good reason, found yourself on your knees. Like, to be there and then find that strength to go, not only am I going to get myself out of this, but I'm not going to allow this to impact my kids, and it's going to happen to them. Yeah.
As I say, I function in a few different dimensions, and there is more to us than just our day-to-day experience. There's more going on here. I don't begin to understand it all, but on some level I know it, and on some level I don't understand it. There was clearly a spirit within me that just had a capacity to do this. I just had the capacity. I didn't know any different. I didn't know if I had a choice or not. This just was my life. This was just how I responded to what was happening to me. And from when I had my children, the thing that terrified me most was doing to them what had been done to me. And I was going to do whatever I could. I haven't always succeeded. If my daughters listen to this, there are times I definitely haven't succeeded, and I have acted completely opposite to how I would have liked to have acted. But overall, if you look at the balance, I got it. I did far better than.
But that's. I think that's any parent. I'm sitting opposite you and had none of what you've been through, and I still, as a parent, my 8-year-old twins will look back, and I'm sure there's things I'm getting wrong. But I guess we try and take comfort as parents in going, I'm doing the best I can today with so much, with the best we can today, with what tools we've got, and like your toolbox that you had of coping mechanisms stuff is completely different from so many other people.
I mean, what's coming to me is love. Love. Yeah, I had my children, I didn't try and get pregnant. I mean, if there's one thing in life that was effortless for me, it was getting pregnant and giving birth. I popped both of my children out in my front room like they were coming through. Like the next generation was coming through. Yeah, they were like, we're coming through and you're going to sort your shit out, basically. Something, I'm a practitioner. I know how for some women getting pregnant is so difficult. Childbirth is so difficult. So I birthed both of my children myself in a hot water tub in my front room without even a paracetamol, because I was so desperate to be super duper conscious for these babies when they entered the world, because I wanted to know from the moment they took their first breath that I was as conscious as I could be to take care of them. And it is extraordinary the way I birthed them. You know, I was supported by my husband. He, he supported me to birth them the way I wanted to. And I brought them from the moment they were conceived. It was very hard with my second daughter because I was battling the dynamics of a very dysfunctional family. But both of them, the intention was there to do right by them. And it always was. And that is love. That is the power of love.
That's such a powerful and beautiful message, I think, for me and you sort of spoke about it before, and I've shared often on the podcast or when I'm talking to people about actually all the things we talk about in business and life and the things we're stressed about and all them things, actually, when the ambition and all the other stuff that we're striving around, essentially, when you strip it back, the reason we're here is to love and be loved.
Yeah.
Right? And almost, I guess, like listening to your story is that love of having children and being a mother is, I guess, was what saved you, maybe.
Yeah. I could not. As I say, I haven't always got it right. And when I came to finish my marriage with my husband, ex-husband, I definitely didn't do that initially in a way that was good for my children. But I actually, looking back, don't think I could have done it in any other way. I think I would still be there today, and my children would be far worse off in terms of me as a role model, as a mother. But overall, they are such extraordinary young women. You know, they are incredible, so different, but so, and they are, you know, they were, I see things, I have to see things from a more spiritual perspective and from a bigger picture. You know, when we're looking at all this trauma, we're looking at it as if we're almost nose up to the picture. Yeah. When you step back and step back and step back and you look at the much greater picture, there is something beyond what any of us probably understand taking place. Epigenetics, generational trauma, all kinds of, you know, things that are going on in the collective consciousness. I can only say that we're all here with a purpose. We're all here to do something. And I was clearly, you know, my dad didn't kill me that night when I was 4 years old. And my dad, as horrific as it was when he killed himself, actually probably freed me to begin my journey of recovery. Because if he'd stayed, I don't know, I was starting to rebel against him actually before he died. But he handed the baton. He couldn't do it himself. He handed the baton. And that's the way I see it. I look at generation, you know, I work with clients all the time looking at generational trauma, and we are baton carriers, yeah. We our DNA. I mean, people talk about past lives. I'm not interested in Cleopatra and some, you know, but I am interested in the DNA that comes through our bones, that comes through our cells. The research into epigenetics, you know, and how, you know, what can we do about that? You know, what can we do about those patterns? And I am, you know, that's my life. I am a pattern changer, and I teach other people to do the same. And you have to be able to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And so everything I went through, you know, because to me that's my normal, and it's people could go through far less than me, and their nervous system, that, you know, their autonomic nervous system could be far more messed up than mine. You know, there's the story. Everybody tells a story, right? There's the story, but then there's the way your unique being processes that. And there are so many different variables to why different people respond differently, and that is the mystery of life, isn't it?
This is Gio. Gio runs a scarf company. Gio doesn't see the need for telecoms. Everybody uses mobiles now. But can a mobile really be a business phone? Gio is having coffee with a client, Gabby. Well, actually, Gio prefers acacia leaf tea. But what happens when someone calls? It could be a big new deal. Surely it would be rude to take the call? But many people hate leaving messages. They may just call a competitor instead. What can Gio do? The answer is simple. Turn the mobile into a business phone. With the Go Giraffe app, Gio can quickly transfer the call. Or, before the meeting, Gio can simply use the app to divert calls. No more missed calls, lost deals, or unhappy customers. Turn your mobile into a business phone today. Go Giraffe.
Absolutely, and I think, you're right. We've all got different levels of resilience. We've all got different levels of coping mechanisms that have instilled in us where that's come from, whether it is the DNA or passed down from or learned behaviour, all of those different things. But I think the fascinating thing about your story, again back to that hope and the choice. I do feel that there's that, like, and I guess you've proved it. There was that point where you made a choice.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go down that path.
I didn't know I wasn't going to go down that path, but I knew I was going to do everything I could to try not to go down that path. Actually, I was always highly anxious. I mean, I suffered with such severe chronic anxiety because my whole life was about fighting with myself or fighting with unconscious levels of me that are potentially programmed like some kind of curse to go down that path. So it was a battle between different parts of me. There's something called internal family systems, and we all are made up of many different parts. It's not as simple as you are either this or that. There are many different parts. We have many different aspects of ourselves that are kind of in a battle or not, or aligned with each other. And I suppose the parts of me, and I still had my mum and my stepdad.
What was your relationship like with them then after all of this, and then after having kids as well yourself? What was your relationship like with your
It's
mums?
been very up and down over the years, more up than down, but it's been very challenging at times. Also with my brother, who I don't presently have a relationship with at all, because we have such different perceptions on various aspects of what we've been through and things that have happened. But with my mother and my stepfather, there's always been a space to go and have, tea. My mum bakes great cake, right? Yeah. You can always, no matter what's going on under the surface, no matter what happened in the past, there is still a framework to go and have a functional time with my children in the home. It was the support I got at certain times, the support I needed. No, but I was able to create that elsewhere. Am I grateful that my mother is still here? So extraordinarily grateful. Did my mother make some horrific decisions for the development of my brother and I? Yes. Would she do it differently if she got her time again? I would hope so. But did she make it with an intent to hurt us? Never. She never had an intent to hurt us, but her own naivety meant that she made some terrible decisions, which I was determined I wasn't going to do.
And I guess you've been able to, with that in mind, I guess with that relationship with your mum, you're able to come at that from as you've just described it, I guess from an empathetic way and a level of kindness to be able to let that go.
Yeah, it's very selfish. It's the most important thing about resolving stuff with other people is not about the other people. It's about not having that toxicity living live within us, because that toxicity is renting space in your body and mind. Okay, so you need to be really careful about what you hold on to, you know, whether it's resentments or blame or whatever, because actually it's hurting your body, it's hurting your organs, it's sitting in you. It's sitting in you. So there is a very, you know, if maybe we'll talk more about my work, but I look at things from a very, very different perspective to a lot of people. You know, I don't have to forgive you, but I do need to be able to let go of that toxic situation or dynamic, because that's hurting me. So it is an act of self-love to not hold on to that.
But no, I think you're spot on, and people don't necessarily always look at it like that. I think, but you're right. We've got to, because it actually it becomes such a negative and a waste of time to hold on to some of these resentment things within us. That stops us being able to grow. If you're able to, like you say, if you're able to look at it as self-love, I'm going to let this go because it's helping me, irrespective of that other person. This is helping me by
I mean, when it comes to letting go, it's not a simple thing. You can't let go with your cognitive brain. No. You can't think your way out. There are tools you need to use and things you need to do to release those patterns and that energy from your body, is what I teach. So I had to have an overdose of toxic resentment, blame, envy, hatred, victimhood, you know, all the stuff. I had it all. I had it all. And you know, we don't get to think our way out of that stuff. A lot of people try, and that is actually why they can't free themselves, because you can't think your way out of it. You have to literally go and find where that energy has got stuck inside you and the alignments that are keeping it locked in. It is not actually that forgiveness, that letting go is not talking therapy. It's not this. It's not even sitting in 12-step. But 12-step was amazing for me to hear people's stories. It was an amazing safe space. It was somewhere I could go, and I could even take my kids with to go, okay, this is the truth. This is what's happening. But the way of letting go and getting to that enlightened, what we're talking about here is enlightenment. And I'm not talking about enlightenment as some spiritual, you know, moment sitting in a cave on a mountain becoming enlightened. I'm talking about when you understand, and this is what I had to train in, and this is what I had to learn, and this is thousands of hours with clients and my own journey, that there is a realignment that needs to happen, which is not a thought process. It is the animal brain in us, which is in our bones, it's in our organs, it's in our nervous system. It is keeping everything locked in. And what I learned through going through many methodologies and training was that I learned it is a combination of the movement of literally unlocking the body, that the postures that have held in the posture of blame, the collapse of victimhood, the powerlessness of grief. You know, all of these experiences have postures and alignments in the body. And I stumbled upon a way to resolve this. And that is true enlightenment, when you literally realign the postures of the body to a place where the body feels lighter. And when you can connect in with those old patterns that got stuck, which is all that trauma is. It's patterns that got stuck, and it's adrenaline and cortisol that got stuck in vacuums in your body, in and locked in. That's what it is. And then when I fortunately learnt to resolve that, I was able to enlighten, to release the weight of that in my body. And with that comes the freedom. And suddenly you're not holding the very energy that created the toxicity that is still in those relationships.
Wow. So, because I find it's really fascinating, and I really want to obviously move on and talk more about your work and go into a little bit of depth about it. I know we've sort of spoke offline a bit about Joe Dispenza as well.
Yes.
We talked a lot about how that...
good old Dr. Joe.
Yeah, but it'd be really good to have the link there of where, I guess, your experience with what he's done and where you found your enlightenment, like you said. And I guess one thing I'm really keen to explore is that with how you teach and what you teach, that you believe that anyone that is suffering from trauma or victimhood or whatever can release that. Yeah.
So trauma has been therapized way too much in my experience from what I know now. People can go down a very, very long road in the wrong direction when it comes to trauma. I think there is more awareness now. Yes, we're talking today about my story and the trauma, but we're coming to a place of total experience, strength, hope, recovery, like a thriving life. Okay, so it's okay to discuss it from that perspective. Talking about the traumatic things that happen to you is a very one or two dimensional experience that can well re-traumatize and make the trauma far worse. You have to be very, very careful about how the body is processing the hormones and sensations of retelling a story of trauma. Okay, it's very, very it's not I don't think, from my experience, I won't let people sit and talk to me about the story of their trauma unless I have them aligned in a specific way, and I'm bringing them back into their bones, into an aligned body that is not a trauma posture, for example. And with Dispenza, so Joe Dispenza wrote Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Well, I definitely needed to do that. Becoming Supernatural. Well, we haven't gone into that much, but Joe Dispenza teaches about all the different energy brains in the body, kind of 8 different energy brains. And, one of his books, Becoming Supernatural. Well, I lived in that. He talks about 5D and the quantum. I didn't need Joe Dispenza to access that. My issue had been in my 20s. I was propelled into that, and I didn't know I was there. So in a way, he bridges. I didn't need to get there. I was there. My job was to get back. So trauma propels you. It accelerates you, I think, into other dimensions. You are experiencing life from a different dimension to just feeling connected and grounded and safe in your body. People leave, it's a thing, they dissociate. So where do they dissociate to? So they're functioning in another dimension. So it was made very clear to me in my 20s when I did some shamanic training that you have to learn to have a foot. If there was messages downloading to me, you've got to learn to have a foot in both worlds. Now, the problem is with most trauma therapies that, yes, there are somatic, lots of really good embodiment and somatic experiencing type methodologies, but they still require a practitioner rather than educating someone about the very body they live in. And the most important thing I stumbled on by accident in the end was the power of my bones. I mean, it sounds crazy. It was the power of the bones. So Dispenza's talking about energy, and we can move into quantum. That's a whole kind of the fact that the perception is all time is now. So if all time is now, then 4-year-old me is present, and also 94-year-old me is present. And I could potentially tap into any version of me at any time. So Dispenza would say, if we don't create a version of ourselves, a new pattern or a new version of ourselves for the future, we will be stuck in the version of ourselves from the past. Now, with his work, we're doing that very much in meditation and the mind, but I do it in the body, and I do it with the bones. So the postures, the alignments that we structurally find ourselves in when we are going through these experiences, and the body has amnesia. Like most people's bodies, I'm observing them, and everyone's got physiological amnesia. You know, people have power bodies that they're not using with their joints and their bones. And the trauma body, the trauma that anyone has is stuck within that biomechanical alignment. It's like if you crash your car, the steering goes off, things go off, and before that car's going back on the road again, you're going to go and make sure all the wheels and everything is aligned correctly. Right, doesn't matter what fuel you put in, you got to, and it, in terms of trauma, whether it be physical or emotional, it is that internal structure that I discovered at the end of the day is what is the bit that's missing, that people don't understand.
So, because again, we spoke a little bit about this offline. There'd be potentially, I guess, people may be sceptical about that, and you must come up against that
all the time,
a fair bit, I guess.
All
but
the time.
So much of what to try and make people understand and believe often comes down to data, and they go and actual proof that this has happened, or this has maybe can you delve a little bit more into the process and that about the Ixchel system, but maybe examples of people you spoke to or you've helped.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, you know, here we have a foot. I know people listening to this won't see this, but here we have a foot, and in this foot it has 26 bones, and we have 2 of these. We have 2 feet. 26 bones, and then you have all the other bones in your body. No one can say this isn't here and this isn't real. This is true. These bones are real. What has this got to do with our emotional or trauma body? Well, it's very, very interesting. What happens is when the body becomes unstable, when the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, so parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, when they become dysregulated, the structures, around them, the rib cage, the pelvis, go out of alignment. And that impacts the feet. Everything in the structure goes out of alignment. And people are utterly disconnected with the very nature of the body that they live in. So I first started working this out for myself because I went and trained with a guy called Gary Ward, who wrote a book called What the Foot. And I always knew, you know, I have a degree in clinical massage, I'm a systematic kinesiologist, I'm a trained mindfulness coach, I've done medical acupuncture, you know, I've done it all, right? And thousands of client hours. But what I always knew was that reflexology was really powerful. And it really annoyed me once because on BBC they had a program and they were speaking to a reflexologist and asking her how it worked or something. And she gave such, bless her, she just didn't have the education, but the answer she gave made it sound like it was just woo-woo. So, but what's actually happening with this foot is that you have trains of fascia, myofascia in your body. It's like the connective, it's like cling film around all of your organs, all of the muscles and under the skin. And it's going from your head down to your feet, and there are many, many trains of it, it kind of going down the side of you, the front of you, the back of you. It's connective tissue. So if you just think about a bit of cling film, and if you were to pull it at one end, it's going to impact the other end where it's attached. Yeah, or if you think of an elastic band, if I pull it, it's going to have an impact on the other part of the elastic band. So the body is like that. The feet were like this. And I understood that then, okay, so everything is kind of affecting everything else, and the working around all of these mechanics in the feet seemed to have an astonishing impact on the body. That's all I knew for years. That's all I knew. And if it worked, great. If it helped people not have PMT or depression, then great. But there was still a big question as to why. Why did it work? When I went and trained in gait analysis, Gary Ward had written this book, What the Foot. And as I started to, I was in a room with Olympic coaches, really, everyone was top of their game. Yeah, it was an extraordinary environment to be in. But what I had, as I started to work with biomechanics, and my pelvis and my knee and my feet came into alignment, I was in a room with 40 people, and I immediately was getting flashes of sexual abuse. I mean, it was terrifying. And I was in a room and it wasn't safe, right, for this. They clocked it and they were like, do you need to get out of the room? And bless him, Gary Ward came out of the room and he started, I was like, I don't know what's happening to me, and he started moving my rib cage and my pelvis. And he just said, I don't know how you even breathe. He said to me, like, your rib cage doesn't move, your pelvis doesn't move. And he started to get those bony structures moving, and I just wept. And he was a great guy. I felt safe with him. This couldn't and shouldn't happen unless you feel safe with someone, but I just wept. And I then continued, this is back in 2014, I then continued to train and work with biomechanics. And Gary Ward, my teacher, there was a TV program called Doctor on the House. Do you know Dr. Chatterjee? Right. So he's best mates with my teacher, Gary Ward. And so in Doctor in the House, Dr. Chatterjee takes this guy who's had chronic pain for 30 years to see Gary, right? And so, he's been on opiates. Dr. Chatterjee would move in for 24 hours with these people. Anyway, Gary had this guy out of pain within 30 minutes. So this was 30 years of chronic pain in 30 minutes. Yes, the guy still needed to do different things and, to keep realigning the body. But the bottom line was, in 30 minutes, 30 years of pain disappeared. And then this was put onto Gogglebox, and so it was like the world and his wife wanted to see Gary Ward. Well, I was one of Gary's really well-trained students, so my clinic ended up filling with people. Now, Gary worked very much with chronic pain, but what I was doing was I was observing also the emotional body. So I came into Gary's work as a clinical with a degree in clinical massage. So I understood a bit more about the nervous system and in terms of trauma history, not necessarily exactly how to work with the nervous system, but I understood people's history. And so because there were so many people, my clinic just filled for about a year with all these people. And I began to see patterns. And I began to observe, and I began to notice who might get better and who might not. And the stories would just pile up. And then, but they were still coming to my clinic. And then I had a situation where I because of my own personal realignment, I was seeing, as I realigned my biomechanics, that I was not in alignment had to fall away. And the hardest thing about that was it meant my marriage had to go. Because when you realign the mechanics and relationships inside your body, which have not had good boundaries, your life externally, this is what I see. I mean, you say, where's the data? The data is growing all the time. But as you realign and get these relationships in your body correct, your boundaries inside feel better, they are safer, And instead of the anesthetized trauma chemicals, right, that have numbed you out from making good decisions, like you've made your decisions based on postures of trauma, you start to feel in to correct boundaries, to correct alignment, and that is not your truth and values will show up more. And I would see this not just in me, but in everyone I worked with, if they worked with this correctly. Now, Gary Ward really just worked with an anatomical and the chronic pain body. But because my journey has been from the trauma body, rather than sports performance and sports injury, it's more about the anesthetized body and the postures that keep you dissociated. I was seeing patterns in myself, in others, and it's non-negotiable. It's a fact. It's just something that the data will continue to build. So my marriage had to go, unfortunately. Would I have ever studied with Gary Ward if I'd known that what I thought was biomechanics just for sports injuries or something was going to play into all the emotional trauma and make me have to realign everything? I don't know. But the evidence was there. It's the truth. You know, it just is the truth. Anyone who comes and trains with me, the light bulbs go on very quickly. There is no unknowing it. You know, there is no unknowing once you realign your biomechanics. It's just truth. There is no question about it. You know, doctors train with me. There is no question about this. It is just a model of working with the human body that hasn't been out there. You know, it is a qualification. What I teach in COVID, what happened was that I took everything I'd learned in terms of biomechanics and I put it into a process so a 10-year-old could understand it. Because and then I started teaching it online, and it is mind-blowing. It is body, you know, you have to experience it. And so, as I say, it's like one body at a time. You know, I can slow-mo you walking. Yeah, I can take a slow-mo video of you walking. I can look at the way your body aligns, and I know what pathologies you will probably have. I know what your emotional state is, because it is non-negotiable. If your pelvis is stuck in an anterior tilt with a rib cage in a particular tilt, your body, your animal body, your experience of being in your body is going to be a particular way.
I get so many questions in my head. I'm thinking that, especially in relation to trauma, I guess so many people listening would maybe think along the lines of, as you mentioned, traditional ways of therapy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That is something that we need to talk about, and then you need to deal with that in your head, in your mind, to be able to cope and recover and get better. Whereas what you're alluding to is that actually, is it still your work? There's a combination of that and what's going on in your mind, of course. Like you've got to align everything in, but to fully embrace it and come out of it as you have. That it's not just the mindset is one part of it, and aligning the body is the other part.
So I would say your mindset is the alignment of your body.
Right, explain that.
So the way your bones and structures are aligned, they are the container and internal scaffolding for the way you put one foot in front of the other. And if they're stuck, if a pelvis is stuck in anterior and you've got a rotated rib cage, this is having an impact on how your autonomic nervous system can regulate. And if the bones in your feet can't function, which most people's can't, you know, most people will say they've got flat feet or something like that. All of these bones and joints are having an impact on your body's capacity for feeling connected, stable on the ground, engaged. Okay, engagement of joints when they're engaged correctly and aligned creates chemicals of feeling engaged and aligned. When your pelvis is aligned correctly, when it can go more neutral or posteriorly tilt, which it can only do if the bones in the feet are activated and aligned correctly, then the parasympathetic nervous system can switch on. So people will have done years of, one of the first times I saw you interview someone was Alice. I came to a networking event, you were interviewing Alice. She was sitting there talking about all of her challenges with neurodiversity and how the tools she's learned and the things she does. At the end of that talk, I went up to her and I said, if you have a pedestal to talk to people here like this, there's something you don't know that you need to know. And I'm sure Alice wouldn't mind me saying now, but within 4 weeks of working with me, she was off her meds. She was off her meds because I taught her to stabilize her bones. Yeah, I taught her about her mechanics. She is now so supportive of, she was like, this is crazy. How don't people know this? I'm working with doctors at the moment. I mean, this is when I want to cry. This is when I want to cry my eyes out, because you're here saying, where is the evidence, as people do, where is the evidence? And that it can really be so simple. And that we are so wrong, and that most people are so far going down the wrong way. I'm working with doctors who, when they do the process, they're doing it for themselves. I have one doctor who's now training with me as a practitioner. She's taught yoga for 25 years as well. Within, 2 or 3 weeks of starting with me, she was like, Victoria, I have to teach this. This is, a 90-year-old could do this and it would resolve everything, not necessarily everything. The doctor at the moment that I'm working with, a German doctor, I met him in a Dispenza retreat, 7 advanced retreats he'd been with Dispenza. He talked to me for 20 minutes. He just said, I came here to meet you. It's you. That's why I'm here. And within, 4 weeks of working with me, he has no more sciatica. He has no more migraines. And you'll love this. His golf teacher, he's an avid golf player. His golf teacher of 4 years said to him last week, I have never, ever seen you swing a golf like that ever before. And, this doctor's going, it's because I can move my rib cage with my feet aligned and my pelvis. This is the bones of who you are, the mechanics. This is the machinery. This is like, so they are, everybody tells a story, is like, I look at the mechanics of your body. Your emotion, is energy in motion. That's what emotion is, okay? The motion of your body, the alignment of your body, the structure of your bones, that's your internal scaffolding. God, the word God, in 12-step, they would always say good, orderly direction. Well, when we look at the bones, and when you get the bones working correctly, and basically within 1 footstep, there are 6 postures our body should be able to access. So if you go to an osteo or chiros or physio, they are only aligned, most of them, the average one. I'm not saying all, obviously, there are other people who know what I know, but they are looking at you standing still or sitting. They are not looking at the way you put one foot in front of the other and the way you access different alignments. Most of those alignments in your body, if they're absent, is because of a physical trauma or an emotional trauma. If you then remind the body about how from the feet upwards, I teach week 1 the feet, week 2 the pelvis, week 3 the spine, week 4 the rib cage, week 5 the shoulders, week 6 the neck, week 7 the skull. Okay, and you build up from there. By the time you realign each of those structures, every single trauma that ever happened that caused you to come out of alignment will be tapped into. Now, if it's just a physical trauma that doesn't have an emotional load, you will get really, really powerful, almost instant results.
If it's a physical trauma, so if you've hurt yourself, as opposed to you've got an injury, knee, hip, whatever.
Yeah,
you've got something like that.
that's easy. That's the easy stuff. That's where what I do literally, transforms people's lives in minutes. But I'm not doing it. You're doing it. Yeah, I'm teaching you. It's a program. You are doing it, right? This is education. If it is, however, because you were raped, or you'd, like me, witness horror. If you continue and are currently in an abusive relationship, if you are, if certain things are going on, so the emotion, the energy in motion is what's keeping everything out of alignment, then this is why the training to do what I do for people is at least 2 years, because you have to be ready to keep bringing that person back into their bones, into the alignment of the bones, which feel strong, engaged, connected, which becomes more powerful than the trauma hormones of the adrenaline and cortisol that need to leave the body. So we are working from a very trauma-informed space. But it is that Peter Levine is an amazing guy. He created methodology, somatic experiencing, and wrote a book called Waking the Tiger. And I would suggest anyone who's interested in anything I might be saying from an emotional perspective goes and reads that book. However, even with that, people will go and they'll have, a long process very often of doing the therapy of somatic experiencing. What I would say is, with what we're doing, we're fast tracking all of that. You do not need to, it can be something where maybe what's taking 7 months or 7 years, you could if you've had fibromyalgia for 15 years, okay, which many people who come to me will have had, you're looking at a year. You're looking at a year of slowly bringing this methodology in, and you will reprogram. You can't not. Because when you get your bones aligned correctly in terms of gait, in terms of the way you put one foot in front of the other, you are reprogramming the body. That's what you're doing. You're putting an old banger, that's been on the road for far too long and not been serviced, back in the garage, and you're just going, okay, let's just realign everything, because it's been through a crash, it's been through this, it's been through that, let's just realign. But yes, you need to do that at a pace that is right for that person, and you need to, if there is trauma and memories that are coming up, you've almost got to help that person become quite disciplined to, rather than be carried off into the story of the trauma chemicals, to come into the feeling of the bones. And the bones, when you activate it, there is a muscle called the psoas muscle, and there is a particular alignment that I don't care how much trauma you've been through. I don't care what it is. And I can say this because I've been through enough to say it. And I've taught enough people to witness them doing it. It doesn't matter what your experience was or how many times it happened. What matters is that you come home now and you learn to realign your body and your mechanics back to the alignments that create a sense of safety in your body. And you can do that. Anyone can do that.
So listening to you talking is so fascinating, and again, I'm not me being skilled, but what I'm wondering is, why then is traditional medicine and traditional doctor, why are we still going down that route of traditional types of therapy, traditional types of medicine, when there clearly is another way. And there is evidence out there as well by the people you have helped. Why are more people?
Well, it's big business. It's very big business. You've got that aspect of it. You've got that people are literally programmed. We're all just walking around. We are all programs. We're a bundle of programs. We've got lots of different apps going on inside us. We're hilarious. Really, we think we know all this stuff, and the truth is we are 99% unconscious. Yeah, you're sitting there right now. you haven't got a clue how your heart's beating, but it is. Yeah, your digestion's get going, or you've got loads of systems in your body going on right now, and you're not conscious of it, but it's going on. Yeah. So, and the bones also have that going on as well. They've got an extraordinary power to support us. Why isn't it out there? Well, this book, it's got iTech on the back of it. It's an endorsed, my book and my methodology is endorsed by iTech. I contacted them, okay, because I felt how you did what you're saying. I'm like, and I contacted iTech, they are a qualifying body, and I said, listen, you've got the world of trauma therapists and body workers and mindfulness and all of therapy, psychology over there. And then you've got the world of sports performance, like physical strength, endurance, and biomechanics over there. Yeah, so it's like, we know. You've also got the fact that the mind was kind of given to religion. Dispenza would say this as well. The mind was given to religion and the body was given to science. So we had a very, very serious division go on there, where it's like the very nature of our mind and body was cut in half and separated. The sports world and physical, endurance, they've got biomechanics over there, right? Biomechanics are to help you run better. Yeah, biomechanics are to help you perform better. Yeah, that's where let's put biomechanics there. The nervous system, the emotional trauma response, that belongs with therapy over here. Yeah, it's all that goes there. We know that people who do sport generally feel quite good. We also know that Olympic athletes and things very often fall into desperate depression, a lot of them, when they stop, and they kind of, it's difficult. And so there's these two different worlds. I contacted iTech and I said, listen, this is not okay. I'm sitting here and I have basically taken an element of biomechanics, the very basics, the how your foot is designed to move backwards, and your foot bones are designed to move backwards and forwards, up and down, and rotate. Okay, the 3D movement of that. And then I teach people to do that in every joint in their body. The osteos aren't teaching you that. The physios aren't teaching you, but just how to come in and recalibrate, not so you can run a marathon, but just so that you can walk correctly, so you don't get plantar fasciitis, or you just so you can do the simple stuff. Biomechanics doesn't have to be about anything other. And then what you've also got within these structures is you have a nervous system. So you've then got like polyvagal theory and all the autonomic nervous and trauma. And very simply, if you just teach someone to realign their biomechanics, what's happening, and stabilize, from the feet upwards, their bones, and because joints act, muscles react. So all muscles are attached to joints and bones. Okay, muscles can't move other than when you contract them really hard, which is cruel and abuse for the body. Muscles should only move based on the joints they're attached to. So it's like the joints are the hinge. The door is the muscle. Okay, so a door moves effortlessly, when the hinge works. If the hinge doesn't work, then we have a problem. The saying becoming unhinged makes me laugh, because our body is just full of hinges and most of them are not working correctly. Okay, whether it's because of physical misalignment, repetitive strain, emotional trauma, think of grief or anger, the way it kind of really gets into the posture of the body. So all of these hinges in our body aren't working correctly, and it's a nightmare for the body, and no one's teaching this. So I approached iTech and I just said, this is not okay. Like, where is this body of work? And someone should be teaching this. And the guy at iTech it was on Zoom, and he looked at me and he said to me, I've always known it's missing. And I'm like, well, if it's missing, why is it missing? And he said, well, because no one's ever created it. And I'm like, well, I'm doing this. Someone should be creating it because I'm doing it. And he was like, well, then send it in. And I'm like, me? Me? But this is me. Someone should. He's like, no one's done it. Send it in.
Wow.
So
Where enters your head that, like, I often talk about imposter syndrome and that type of thing. Where did, like, to know that you've created this work and you've seen the results, and it's been there, and then for you to reach out to a higher body and then say that's not yet. We knew something around this, but no one's addressed it.
This is when I want to cry.
I
don't want to cry about anything that happened to me. I want to cry about the fact that there is a body of knowledge that is not out there that should be. Well, it is out there now. You know, it's called Get Into Your Body. My book, it's called, the methodology is called Get Into Your Body, and it is a body of knowledge, and you have a body of knowledge within you. Everyone does. And exactly, when you're saying, but where's the evidence? What about, I am now climbing a very different mountain. And the mountain I'm now climbing is that, you've asked, how did I survive it? It's effortless for me to deal with any memory I have, because I have this methodology, because I have created the answer I was looking for. I am the one I was looking for. You are the one that you're looking for. Anyone who has any type of chronic pain, emotional or physical, you are the one that you're looking for. You are the one that with the right guidance will be able to realign the structures in your body, to realign the way you move and the way you think and the way you feel. And I don't care how much coaching you do. I don't care how much mindset you do. You are wasting energy if you are not realigning the bones of who you are. You are an extraordinary, and I'm saying this to anyone listening to this, you are an extraordinary being. Yeah, we are living in untapped power. Untapped power is not just a mental way of looking at things. Untapped power, when you feel in to the power of correctly aligned biomechanics, you will experience yourself as someone you've never experienced yourself as being. And, people who know me and people who knew me are in awe of me, because they have seen that transformation. And people who train with me, when those this is enlightenment. People will go, oh my God, now I really know what self-love is. And they'll say, self-love is, it was only ever needing to learn my body and how to correctly come in and learn how to move my body. And we're not talking yoga, we're not talking Pilates, we're not talking to the gym, about the gym. We're talking about what you should be doing before you go into any of that, which is to understand your own personal boundaries of every joint in your body and the dimension and the ranges of movement of every part of yourself. And when you experience it, and if you see the passion in me, it's because I watch the lights go on in people all the time. And I watch people come home. And when I say come home, they come home to the body of themselves with that knowledge. And people will say to me, why did my doctor never show me this? Why has no one ever shown me this? And I'm like, I know. I'm doing my best. We're doing our best.
I mean, it's one thing I love and have loved about getting to know you is your passion. Like, as soon as you start to, you can tell that it just comes out of you. But you listen to your story that you've kindly shared, I guess, with us today, and that you are living proof of the work, right? The work you've created. That, like, whether we talk about spirituality, whether we talk about beliefs, religion, whatever those things are, that actually we're finding our purpose in life and why we're here, and it's clear for anyone watching and anyone listening that you certainly have found that. This is what, like, and as tragic as it sounds, I guess, but all of the you're a clear example of you've not used meant, because no one should have ever gone through what you've been through, but you've gone through what you went through to get you to a point of potentially changing the world, changing people's lives, and having, like, we leave, when we finally come to leave this earth, we look back on our lives and hope we've done some good and had an impact, and whatever happens from this moment on, you've already achieved that to a degree, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think of myself now as a bit of the gatekeeper between the worlds, because I do spend a lot of time in meditation. I do, all the dispenser stuff. That is very important. I bring a lot of information through. I'm not a great reader. I'm very dyslexic, but information comes in, it drops in to me, and I learn in different ways. But we are, I'm here. They said to me in meditation or whatever, I was told in my 20s, you've got to have a strong footing in both worlds. If I'd known that would end up being literally learning the very physical nature of our body and the spiritual gift it is, we are spiritual beings, having a human experience. And the interesting thing is that your energy is actually in your joints. Joints. Well, there's also the intention of where does the intention come from? To create the tension within. That's a whole other level. But it really is that the gift of enlightenment is to truly feel free in your body and to feel alignment in your body. And when it switches on, it is like light switches switching on. And the joy of also the chemicals that are sent to the brain from correct alignment is the joy that we are all looking for, right? And people are like, oh my God, I feel safe. They'll go, I found my psoas. I actually, oh my God, my rib cage. People are like, they're like, I didn't know. I'll be teaching breath workers. I'll be teaching like yoga teachers. I'll be teaching. And I didn't realize I didn't know this. I'm like, I know. It's so simple. Is it easy? No. If you've got a history of trauma, do you need to take it slowly? Could you hit crisis for 3 weeks? Yes, you could. Will we hold you in that? Yes, we will. Will I know exactly how to bring you in? Yes, I will. Have we set up a community of practitioners to hold space for each other? Yes, we have. Have I set up a community so that people can listen to each other's stories and hear from each other? Because as you say, where's the evidence? Have I set up the community to create that? Yes, I have. Is it spreading around the world? Yes, it is. Federation of Holistic Therapists voted me Tutor of the Year last year, but, because have I set it up so it's in video, audio, written in images, so anyone can learn it in their learning style, so no one feels shut out from the learning experience. I think it has a power of its own. I think that little 4-year-old me, who was stuck with secrets and toxicity held in her body. No one spoke to her. Secrecy, by the way, is a big one. I still, even in the last few years, have had things happen in my life which I wouldn't share on this podcast. It's not appropriate. So when you're holding things in your body, when you're holding things that have happened, this is all going into your mechanics. It's all within you. But you can move things. You can, whatever the energy is of whatever's happened to you, you have the power to realign your structures so that it's not so painful. That's the bottom line. And we teach, there are 6 phases of gait within 1 footstep. There's suspension. Suspension is the power of feeling supported. So when you walk, all of your weight needs to sink down one leg so you can lift the other foot forward. Agreed? Right. So that's one alignment you need in your body. That's the flat foot alignment. Most people have it. Then you have another alignment of gait, which is called propulsion. So if you think of runners in the starting blocks, that's propulsion. Hardly anyone has it. And we teach it. And propulsion is also what you need, that alignment. It's what you need to allow safety. It's very complicated. I can't go into it now, but you need a posterior tilt and you need to switch on the psoas. And most people can't access that. So people go, I've got flat feet. People don't have flat feet. People have forgotten how to supinate the foot, which is an arch foot. Now, the sports people would see that purely as a sports thing. However, what I've seen is how that plays into the emotional body. So most people with flat foot, a lot of them will have high anxiety, depression. Whereas when you can start to arch your foot, right, when you have the mechanics of that, you will suddenly be feeling safe. You'll be feeling, because certain things just match up. Certain alignments of the body are required for good mental health. And, you know, what can I say? We're trying to teach it. We're doing our best, Sam.
Amazing. Well, look, I mean, I'm so grateful for you obviously coming on and sharing your incredible story. And there's so many amazing things to tell up anyone listening that wherever they are in their lives, I guess just hopefully giving people a bit of hope.
Yeah,
to a degree.
for sure. Can I say one more thing, actually? Because I there are certain things I can't share here in this podcast, but I would like to share one thing. I built this methodology. I tested it out in a courtroom when I was being attacked, and I was needing to stand my ground. This was about 3 years ago. What I teach is not just something to help you recuperate from trauma. What I teach is what you need to, number one, create the boundaries so you're not attracting trauma into your life. And number two, if you are in trauma, you will, in the moment of situations, find a power within you that is so strong that if you are an abuse victim, if you've experienced that, there is a biomechanic alignment that abusers manage to create in victims. And I turned that around. And I would like people to know, that if you're in a relationship where it feels unequal in some way, there is an alignment within you that gets stuck, and you can switch that. You can switch it. I did.
Amazing. And look, I know you sort of agreed to this. We will obviously put your details in the notes, and people can reach out and anyone, because I think there's going to be. We've got the book.
The book.
And I think there's going to be a million questions. I feel like I need to get you back on for another episode, because there's even more questions I've got. But look, we are going to round up with a couple just to finish off with. And obviously I always have to finish with. I mean, look, we've listened to your amazing story and how you've turned your life and what you've created and how you've come out. But the essence of the podcast, we always talk about success, right? How do you define it? How do you define success?
I was thinking about this because I know I got your email and it was like, and I've been like, oh no, I've got to answer that. And this morning, what came up for me, success is about having really good boundaries for me. My success has come from being someone who had no boundaries, didn't even know what boundaries were, to having, I call myself a boundary beast nowadays. And being a boundary beast means you know where your limits are in all areas of your life, in relationships, in movement, in time management, it doesn't mean you always have to have really strong boundaries. but it means you know what your boundaries are. And if you know what your boundaries are, and you pretty much stick to them, and they can go in different directions at different times, but if you know what your boundaries are, you will always be going in the right direction. So I used to live in chronic anxiety all of the time about the unknown. Because when you have really bad boundaries, anything can get in. So you should be worried. Once you have good boundaries, you will communicate differently, and you will see red flags coming a mile away. So you don't have to live from a place of chronic anxiety and fear, because you know you are aligned in a way where you will attract and you will create exactly what is right for you. And it maybe that sounds like it might not make sense to everyone. Maybe it's an experience you have to have. But boundaries are very, very, very important. Alignment is all about, where are the boundaries of what's going on. And the way you communicate when you have good boundaries can only create more good. It doesn't mean it's always going to be easy, but it means you're going in the right direction. And for me, success has come from learning to move all parts of me in the correct direction, and in a way that is not overstretching myself so I don't burn out. And that allows, it's just beautiful, to have boundaries. I've had to go to court to create good boundaries in the last few years. I've had to deal with the hangover of having had no boundaries in my past and setting up relationships from a place of being so anaesthetized. I didn't know how far away I was from correct alignment. So that's success, because you're on the right path. You're going in the right direction. You can't know what's coming ahead, but you know you're going in the right direction. And I watch it happen. The journey, it's the journey, It's not the destination. And the journey is great.
Mate, well look, there was one thing I just wanted to ask, if we can, just to finish up on. I guess, listening to your journey and your story and where you are, and I guess the tools that you've equipped yourself with now to get you to this place where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was to go back and you could see him in front of your dad and speak to him now, what would you say to him?
I have done that. I do that in meditation. Jessa, I'm so sorry we had so little time together to enjoy our life. But I took the baton, and I ran with it. And it's transforming many, many lives. And so we did something good. That whatever he did, I took the gifts of it. I took the gifts of it, and that's all I can do. I'll finish with this. Dealing with my dad's suicide was the most horrific thing I ever had to do, and I had no tools, no help for many years. I didn't even know it was a thing that I deserved to have help. And then I think they're called the Wish Foundation or something, and it's for families affected by suicide or murder. And they say recovering from suicide is harder than recovering from a family member being murdered, because when it's suicide, you can feel like you were the murderer, or you could have been. But they had this beautiful thing, and it was that, imagine you have a really beautiful crystal and a really boring pebble, and then a really ugly rock. And the really beautiful crystal is about all the good times, the beautiful things that happened. And the boring pebble is like the day-to-day. And the ugly rock is the really bad stuff, the terrible stuff, the ugly stuff. And for many years, I was in complex grief because I would be like, well, if he was really good, I shouldn't hate him and resent what he did. Or if he was because he did such bad things, I shouldn't love him because he did such bad things. And then there's just the boring stuff. And what they describe is actually you can take those 3 stones and you can hold them in your hand all at once. And none of them invalidate the other. You just hold all 3 at once. And with my dad, those are the conversations I have with him. That, okay, Dad, today's not a good day. I really hate you today. It's that stone. But the other 2 stones is, another. And, but yeah, it's that I have taken something from all of this and I've converted it into good. And I'm alive and I'm here. And, the timing of this interview is really interesting because last week I was the age my dad was when he killed himself. And so I am definitely not about to kill myself. And so I did it. I got to that age and I have created something extraordinary and people in my community are going to help me move this forward. And anyone listening to this, if there is a blessing that came from what happened with my dad and his book that was called Images of Destruction. I used to think, I'm going to write a book called Images of Reconstruction, but that would be about me. The book I've written is not about me. The book I've written is about every human, a workbook that they can go through to realign them, And that would be what I'd say to my dad, I turned it, and he would say to me in spirit, if that is a thing, he would say, what the agreement was. This was it. This was it.
Honestly, thank you so much for coming on, for just being so open, honest, vulnerable, and on the other side of it, being so inspiring and taking something traumatic and creating something so wonderful that I hope gets to more and more people, which I know you'll make it your mission and it will happen. I know that. It's just so inspiring, and I wish you every success with getting it out there.
Oh.
You're a beautiful human being inside and out, and I'm grateful that you've been able to share your story with us today. So thank you.
Oh, Sam, thank you so much. And the timing of this is just beautiful, and that we're here in projects, which is, love your projects. It's a happy place.
It was meant to be.
This was meant to be.
Awesome. Thanks again, and as they say, that is a wrap.
That is a wrap. Okay.